The 8th of May, 1945. Nazi Germany has at last surrendered. The countries of Europe are all celebrating the victory. It's over, they're all saying. It's over. In every eye shines the hope for a better world. In Moscow, New York, Paris, London, Amsterdam, Prague, everywhere, people are rejoicing. In one little Belgian village, it's carnival time, and the whole story's being acted out. Exodus, captivity, liberation, with Miss Victory there on horseback. And the four big stars of it all, Churchill, de Gaulle, Roosevelt, and Stalin. The joy is real enough, but it won't last. Nazi Germany may have been beaten, but Europe is on its knees. It's been the most murderous war mankind has ever known. 27 million Soviets have disappeared. Germany has lost 4.5 million soldiers and more than 1.5 million civilians. Nearly 6 million Jews have been exterminated. In the whole of Europe, the Second World War has cost the lives of almost 40 million men, women, and children. The continent is one huge cemetery. The survivors mourn their dead, while all around them lie ruins. In the Soviet Union, more than 70,000 towns and villages have been wiped out by the German occupation. In France, hundreds of thousands of buildings have been razed to the ground. In Holland, the dikes have given way, sabotaged by the Nazis. Entire neighborhoods now lie underwater. Budapest is in ruins. The whole city lies broken and battle-scarred. As for Berlin, it's just the skeleton of its former self. This field of ruins is all that's left of Warsaw. 90% of it has been destroyed. The American photographer John Vachon says, "I just can't understand how we came to this. It's all too brutal. I just can't believe it." This is the worst cataclysm the continent has ever known. Fertile Europe transformed into a barren moonscape. From May 1945, hundreds of thousands of Germans streamed back from the countryside where they'd fled to escape the horrors of war. There's no petrol. Hitler wanted a 1,000-year Reich. Instead, he's thrown his people back 1,000 years. Now they're home, they all need food and lodging. Hardship, though, is all around. The transport networks have all been destroyed, so no supplies are getting through. There's nothing left. There are coupons for everything: bread coupons, milk coupons, clothing coupons, meat coupons. Even in France, which was liberated months ago when Germany surrendered, the meat ration is just 100 grams a day, including bones. It's all one long queue. Even water rationing can be strict, and you're not allowed a full body wash. In Naples, in Budapest, it's a dreadful situation. Hundreds of street kids are so hungry that they turn to all kinds of vice, including prostitution. They're digging around for a scrap of food or anything they can barter. A few lumps of coal are a prized commodity. Such distress soon leads to looting. The USSR, the United States, Great Britain and France have won the war. But will they be able to win the peace? For to all this penury and destruction is now added another huge problem: what to do with the millions of Germans and Italians taken prisoner on the battlefield. And though there are so many of them, they're only a small part of the huge migration that's underway, one of the biggest ever seen, with tens of millions of people displaced by the war, all of them longing for home. The four Allied powers are faced with a seemingly impossible situation. How can all these problems be resolved at once? How can a continent bled dry be revived? How can it be rebuilt? And above all, what to do with a defeated Germany? From now on, Berlin is in the hands of the Soviets, because they got there first. They set about making themselves popular by providing the city with fresh supplies. It's a nice gesture, but away from the cameras, it's a different story. Russia has been devastated, so, on Stalin's orders, special commanders are tearing down factories, removing the machinery, and even tearing up train tracks. It all heads east. Unfortunately, though, women are also considered part of the spoils of war. More than 2 million German women have been raped by the Red Army. Like this unknown woman. For her, as for so many others, the war's still not over. By June 1945, Berlin's gates lie open to all its vanquishers. America's Eisenhower, Britain's Montgomery, Russia's Zhukov, and France's de Lattre all meet up there. And they're of one mind. Germany has to be broken. According to the terms of the Yalta Agreement, the US, Russia, Britain, and France are to divide Germany up between them. Although Berlin's in the Soviet zone, it is to be shared between the four allies, thus symbolizing the spirit of cooperation between victors. The allies all celebrate together. Behind their smiles, though, hides a powder keg of disagreements, and the fuse is burning. The first panels dividing the city go up. And with charming Red Army recruits directing the traffic, everyone's settling into their sectors.
Ну что ж, снимайте, только уже работу не брошу, буду работать.
The victors pose among the ruins to be immortalized for posterity. It's the least they deserve after 5 years of war. GIs are visiting the Reichstag or the Olympic Stadium. They're checking out the place where Hitler's body was supposedly burned. The petrol cans are still there. In the Germans' struggle to survive, their Führer is soon forgotten. One young Berliner writes, "Now everybody just turns their back on Hitler as if nothing had happened. Everyone was being persecuted and nobody spoke up." But the Allies haven't forgotten. To their eyes, the Germans are still dangerous and not to be trusted. The American troops' orders are clear. Don't fraternize.
Somewhere in this Germany are stormtroopers by the thousands. Out of sight, part of the mob, but still watching you and hating you. Every German is a potential source of trouble. Therefore, there must be no fraternization with any of the German people. The German people are not our friends.
For the GIs, though, it's a difficult order to obey. The spectacle of such suffering gets to them. As one officer notes, "When I see 2,000 or 3,000 old women and kids all looking so weak and frightened, I can't help but feel pity." And of course, a lot of these soldiers haven't seen any women for months. As one military attaché puts it, to a man bored and fed up with the company of other men, almost anything in skirts is a stimulant and a relief, and German women were undeniably attractive in a wholesome, physical, sexy way. They were what the boys called easy. GI and Fraulein were magnet and steel. Along the banks of the Wannsee Lake, German women willingly surrendered to their captors. In a Germany stripped of all it had, a bar of chocolate or of soap will buy a soldier any girl he fancies. Pretty soon in the dance halls, the girls aren't dancing with each other anymore, and prostitution, both professional and amateur, is rife. German men may curse these occupiers who are stealing their women, but they simply can't compete with those G.I. Joe rations. There you have it, they grumble. Germany's future, some dreadful American soldier and a German whore. There's urgent work to be done in the ruined cities. Getting the running water back on, mending the bridges, digging out the rubble. And all by hand. There's no machinery left. Like it or not, Berliners are going to have to clean up the town. If they want to eat, they'd better get to work. Thousands of women get together to move all the millions of tons of debris that's burying their city. They call them the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women. It's an exhausting and seemingly endless task. And all the while, tens of thousands of nameless children still wander through the ruins looking for their families. As he travels through Germany, a British major writes, "The most astonishing thing is the total absence of men between 17 and 40. It's a land of women, children, and old folk." The husbands, the sons, the fathers, they're all dead, either that or interned. Because the Allies are still holding almost 11 million prisoners of war. And that's expensive, so they have to earn their keep. They're shared out among the victors, and they're set to work rebuilding the countries they've helped to destroy. They're like modern-day slaves, rented out for starvation wages. In Great Britain and in France, the authorities subject more than 1 million German prisoners to forced labor. To pay off their debt, prisoners sometimes have to do dangerous work. They're made to clear of their minds all the zones that have been booby-trapped during the occupation. It costs many of them their lives. To face up to their crimes, some are forced to exhume the mass graves of their countless victims. The victors are settling accounts with the losers. At the same time, they're governing a divided Germany and all the millions of prisoners. Pretty soon, it all gets too much for them. How are they to repatriate the millions of displaced persons that the Reich has rounded up from all over the continent and who all want to go home? The Jews and political deportees still languishing in the camps. The prisoners of war spilling out of the stalags. All the Nazi regime's forced labor conscripts who are now abandoning their factories. And then there are all the civilians who fled the combat. In total, the war has led to the displacement, either by force or by their own choice, of nearly 40 million people throughout Europe. It's a jumble of different nationalities, all tramping through the total devastation. In the heart of Germany, whole columns of them stream across a makeshift bridge. More than 2 million Russians, 1 million Poles, 330,000 Czechs, 600,000 refugees from Central Europe are all heading east. At the same time, more than 2 million French, 570,000 Belgians, 400,000 Dutch, and 420,000 Italians are heading west. As an English journalist puts it, you see the whole history of Europe out on the roads of Germany. It very soon becomes a nightmare for the Allies to have this human tide sloshing freely around. Because a lot of these refugees have just one thing on their minds: revenge. On their way home through the villages of Germany, these victims of the Reich leave in their wake an ever wider trail of theft, rape, and destruction. Locals are even leaving the white flags hanging at their windows. Pillage is endemic. Russians, Poles, and French all go at it to their heart's content. It has to be stopped, observes a British captain. Everywhere, the war has sapped all human dignity. In the newly liberated death camps, many of the prisoners have started inflicting rough justice on their former captors. One deportee admits that, "When I was freed, I reckoned we should have wiped the whole of Germany off the map." Some Nazis try to escape by blending in with their victims. The GIs ask the former prisoners to identify them, and sometimes they let them have their vengeance. One Holocaust survivor reveals that the Russians gave us 24 hours to do whatever we liked with the Germans. At Dachau, the SS guards are all killed. As another survivor puts it, "It was good, I liked it. At the time, nothing could have given us more satisfaction. It was perhaps the sole thing that made it worthwhile to have survived the war, being able to allow ourselves that." The killer's accomplices are also punished. In the Dessau camp in Germany, a lot of them are identified. One important witness to it all is photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, who immortalizes the scene. In these images, a Gestapo informant is confronted by a woman she'd denounced. It's all getting urgent. These people have to be returned home quickly. And that's a risky business, because they could all be carrying an invisible scourge, typhus. The Allies set up roadblocks everywhere, and there's one order of the day, DDT, a powerful insecticide. DDT powder, says one man, in our faces, down our trousers, in our ears, up our noses. You could taste it. They drowned us in it. Everyone the Americans have deloused is issued a card. Pretty soon the French won't let anyone across the Rhine unless they've got one of them. The Holocaust survivors have no idea how they'll get home. They're too weak and sick. At first, the Allies can't even understand what tortures they've been through. For although the majority of the Reich's prisoners have survived, only 2% of Jews have escaped the programmed extermination. There are no plans for taking care of them. So the Allies improvise, feeding them whatever they can. Within 6 weeks of the Bergen-Belsen camp being liberated, 13,000 deportees have died either of typhus or of malnutrition brought on by food too rich for such walking shadows. Some weeks after the victory, survivors are still wearing their hideous striped fatigues and still dying.
A history-making moment as Lord Halifax calls for a standing vote on the approval of the Charter of International Organization, and the heads of the 50 United Nations delegations rise to be counted. The vote is unanimous. The charter of a new world is born.
Although chaos still reigns over in Europe, in San Francisco, the United Nations ratifies its charter of the 26th of June 1945, by which its members intend to ban forever war between nations. The UN will ease the suffering of the old continent. Its relief agency, the UNRRA, sends essential supplies such as potatoes, cooking oil, meat, soap, and clothes for the millions of displaced persons. Thousands of abandoned children can now rebuild their lives. Smiles now light up all those faces that had lost, in the torment that had surrounded them, all trace of hope. The UNRRA organizes them into groups by nationality and arranges their return home. Little by little, the railway tracks are all repaired, and the first trains set off for all the cities of Europe. It's a convoy of hope, bringing with it the promise of seeing one's loved ones again. Some of the tears being shed are now tears of joy. It's a miracle of organization. 1,500 planes have been pressed into service in the West to take 36,000 people a day safely home. In Brussels, in Paris, in Amsterdam, Moscow and Prague, they're coming home to an ecstatic welcome. One corporal, back from 5 years of captivity, writes, "There on that platform, I found all that was dear to me, my wife, my daughter, my whole life. It hasn't really sunk in yet that I'm a free man now." One woman tells how she will never forget the moment we ran into each other's arms. Such incredible happiness, tears of joy, such a wonderful homecoming. And his little girl that he hadn't seen since she was just a year old and was now 6, threw herself into his arms saying, "Daddy, Daddy," as if he'd never left. Behind closed doors, though, these homecomings are sometimes bitter ones. These men coming home are like strangers to their own families. The liberation sees an explosion of divorce all over Europe. And while some come home to their families, others find nobody home. It's particularly painful for the very few Jews who've survived. They're in such a pitiful state that shelters have to be set up for them. Those who return to Paris are lodged at the Hotel Lutetia, the former HQ of the German Secret Services, now a hostel for the homeless. On one wall are pinned hundreds of photos that simply say "missing" along with a name. For many, the joy of getting home is a momentary one. All their loved ones have disappeared. One deportee, Louise Alcan, says, "There was no joy left. We were bringing too many dead people home with us." These survivors will be haunted for a long time by what they've been through. Nazism may be dead, but anti-Semitic hate lives on. Long after the war, Eastern Europe is still ablaze with pogroms. The most terrible of them is at Kielce, just 200 kilometers from Warsaw. It all starts with an 8-year-old boy running away and accusing Jews of having kidnapped him. In reprisal, 42 Jews are killed and 80 others wounded. Women, soldiers, and policemen are all part of the mob.
Mord kielecki wstrząsnął sumieniem świata. Te kobiety przeszły przez gehenny obozów niemieckich i dziś w zaraniu odrodzonej wolności straciły swoich najbliższych. Straciły ich z rąk ludzi, którzy mienią się Polakami. Nie możemy zrzucić z siebie odpowiedzialności za tę zbrodnię, która rzuciła cień na dobre imię Polski.
According to one Polish Jew, it felt like we were living on shifting sand. We wanted to get back to living like human beings. The pogrom at Kirs shattered all our illusions. We just couldn't stay there a moment longer. But where are they to go? Many head off in search of asylum, like these 900 orphans, Czech, Polish, Hungarian, all from Buchenwald. They're all full of hope for a new life in the West. The governments of Eastern Europe let them leave, not too unhappy to be getting rid of their Jewish minorities. In July 1945, the Big Three meet at the heart of a defeated Germany to negotiate the rules that will govern the post-war period. The new president, Harry Truman, proudly salutes both the men and the powerful arsenal that have brought victory. He heads over to the Soviet zone, to Potsdam, which briefly becomes the center of the world. Stalin arrives a day late. US Ambassador Averell Harriman remarks that it must be a great satisfaction, after all the trials and tragedies, for him to be in Berlin. Stalin's deadpan reply: Tsar Alexander got to Paris. It's the Kremlin's capo who dominates the conference. His hundreds of divisions have liberated Eastern Europe, and now he wants it all under the red flag. He has a strong card to play. Communist parties everywhere will blindly observe his orders. Stalin has been sat right opposite Harry Truman. In the Soviet ruler's eyes, Truman's just a Kansas City shopkeeper. He can't hold a candle to Roosevelt, opines Uncle Joe. He's neither intelligent nor educated. But Roosevelt's successor has turned up at Potsdam with a trump card of his own. And it's called Trinity, the first atomic bomb. Just 4 days ago, Trinity's been tested out in the New Mexico desert and released a power equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT. It's a turning point in history. Humanity has entered the atomic age with the birth of a weapon that could destroy it all. The talks go on. Truman rather cryptically announces to Stalin that he's developed a new weapon of great destructive power. Stalin doesn't even blink. Away from the main conference, however, he confides to his foreign minister Molotov that they have to catch up with the USA. No doubt Washington and London are hoping we won't be able to develop the bomb for ourselves. They want to force us to accept their plans. Well, that's not going to happen. A few days later, Truman orders 2 atomic bombs to be dropped. On Hiroshima on the 6th of August, and on Nagasaki on the 9th. In the space of a few minutes, the nuclear blast wipes out more than 150,000 Japanese. The Empire of the Rising Sun surrenders. The Second World War is over. Stalin has come to Potsdam the top dog. He soon finds out, though, that the little Kansas City shopkeeper is more determined than he thought. Meanwhile, through all these endless discussions, people are still caught up in the frenzy of liberation. Publicly, in France, Italy, Belgium, Norway, and Denmark, women are having their heads shaved. Any commerce with the enemy, even socializing with them, is enough to cause suspicion. And with such crimes, real or imagined, vigilantes give free rein to their fury. It's a release for any men who might have felt their virility threatened by defeat and occupation. Right up until 1946, tens of thousands of women are still being thus humiliated. It's not just hair being cut off either, heads are rolling too. In the Allier region at Cussé, 2 collaborators are seized from the prison by a fanatical crowd, and the police allows the crowd to express its feelings. Nazism appears to have been infectious, reads one editorial, to the point of persuading some people that violence is permissible. What is the point of a victory over barbarians if we then start imitating them and behaving like they do? This savage purge is going on all over Europe. It's as if before the page can be turned, it has to be stained with violence. Once all the fury is vented, it's time for justice to prevail. In France, Belgium, Italy, Holland, and Norway, hundreds of thousands of collaborators are brought to trial. The hangman can now have his day. In Italy, 2 young filmmakers, Visconti and De Santis, immortalized the brutal reality of the purges. These images are misleading, though. Many collaborators are either sentenced in absentia or manage to evade justice. But after years of bloodshed, the world is impatient for the epilogue and for some closure. The biggest criminal trial in history opens in November 45 in Nuremberg, the very place where the anti-Semitic laws were announced 10 years ago. The leading figures of the Nazi Party must answer for their crimes. Among them, Hermann Göring, Hitler's right-hand man. Rudolf Hess, the half-mad visionary. But also Wilhelm Keitel, Supreme Commander of the Wehrmacht. In all, 21 former leaders come before the court. At the start of the trials, the U.S. Attorney General addresses the jury.
The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated.
You must plead guilty.
The accused all step up to the bar.
Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage für nicht schuldig. Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
Nicht schuldig.
It'll take almost a year, 400 hearings, and 16,000 pages of transcriptions to show the world the full extent of Nazi barbarism. Among the many witnesses is the communist resistance member Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier, who was interned at both Auschwitz and Ravensbrück. Her testimony impresses the courtroom.
Êtes-vous témoin direct?
Oui. Une nuit, nous avons été réveillés par des cris effroyables. Nous avons appris le lendemain matin par les hommes qui travaillaient au Sonderkommando, le commando des gaz, que la veille, n'ayant pas assez de gaz, ils avaient jeté les enfants vivants dans les fournaises.
For such unspeakable acts, the tribunal employs for the first time ever the terms genocide and crimes against humanity. Hundreds of other trials follow. Trials such as that of Ilse Koch, the witch of Buchenwald, who collected tattoos from deportees and shrunken heads. Her macabre trophies are introduced as evidence. She's sentenced to life imprisonment. The worst offenders are hanged, such as the scourge of Czechoslovakia, Karl Hermann Frank. Their bodies are incinerated and their ashes scattered, so as to leave no memorial to them or their crimes. In Russia, the executions draw thousands of spectators, all eager to watch their oppressors die. Widespread as it is, though, the eradication of the Nazis will remain incomplete. The Das Reich division, for example, burnt down the peaceful village of Oradour-sur-Glane and massacred 642 of its men, women, and children. But its commander, General Lamading, will die peacefully in his bed. And how many others responsible for the final solution will remain at large? After all the vengeance, the time has come to rebuild. But it'll be a huge task to drag Europe out of the shadows. People are still hungry. And as long as Germany's future remains uncertain, another war is looming. The Americans and the Soviets don't see the coming new era in the same way at all. The Allies have won the war, but can they win the peace?